Well, hello, my friends. You know the old saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? Well, when it comes to apple trees, ironically, we actually did have apple trees in our backyard. But my dad is the tree, I and my brothers are the apples, and so are my sons. And what I'm referring to is autism, dyslexia, ADHD. It all started with my dad's side of the family, primarily. We didn't discover that until my oldest was diagnosed with Asperger's when he was 7. He's now 24. But that diagnosis really did shed light on a whole lot of the behavioral patterns and habits and ways of thinking that had caused so much pain in the generations of my family. And it all comes back to the more problematic aspects of autism, the all or nothing thinking, the impulsivity, the reactivity. So we didn't know any of this stuff growing up. It caused us a lot of pain. But we were able to start doing a lot of healing once we had a sense of what was going on. And for my dad, I'm hoping that the insights gained about autism and such allowed him to get off his own back, because my dad is harder on himself than a lot of people you could meet. And the reasons for that is he grew up in the 50s when he was going to school. He had very abusive parents, and he also had undiagnosed Asperger's and dyslexia. So when he was going through his school, he had such a hard time learning, and they didn't know how to educate him, so they didn't. They give him busy work. And I asked him, I said, how did it feel when, they wouldn't try? They would just kind of put you off in the corner and, not give you attention and try to help you learn. He says, made me feel like I was stupid. And he spent his whole school career thinking, I'm stupid. I can't learn. The problem is me. You know how much shame gets instilled in a person if that is the impression of themselves? And he never really learned. They passed him through school. He graduated and barely had any education. Struggled to read because of the dyslexia, struggled socially because of the Asperger's, high anxiety. He joined the military like a lot of people did in those days. And by the time he joined the military, my father, who is very kinesthetic, meaning his wisdom is in his body, he has an incredible mechanical knowledge. It's almost savant-like, with his ability to troubleshoot and fix things and come up with workarounds, whether it's with wiring or gears or anything like that. That is his genius. But they don't measure that in high school. They don't measure that in math class. They don't measure it when you're writing a report. You're lucky if it comes up in shop class that has a very specific number of things they want to teach you, as opposed to finding out what your natural abilities are, if there is a shop class anywhere. So my dad got himself a black belt in judo before he even entered the military. And I think that was just to release tension. If you're very kinesthetic and you use your body to experience the world, something very physical would help you feel grounded, feel in control of your body, and be able to feel in control of your life when you got abusive parents, maybe. Well, he was so good at it when he went into the military, nobody could flip him, nobody could throw him, including the instructor. So they made my dad the instructor. And he ended up teaching unarmed combat to the Rangers when he was in the military, and he was a Ranger himself. And when he got out of the military, he joined the phone company, kinesthetic. He got to climb ladders all day and burn off that physical energy and use his mechanical knowledge to wire phones and do all that stuff. But he still felt like he was stupid. He still felt like he was worthless. And he met my mom, who, rest her soul, we lost her in April, raging ADHD that she didn't know about. She was like the Energizer Bunny, bouncing here, bouncing there, very erratic, very creative. But as I watched my dad growing up, I watched a man who was relentless in his pursuit of doing what he simply referred to as a good job. There was one time I was working with him, and it was hot. It was in a warehouse, climbing ladders all day. And I just said, man, can't we just be done? Isn't that good enough? And he looked at me, he paused. He looked at me and says, why do a bad job when you can do a good one? Shut me up. I didn't have a good answer for that because I was thinking about being lazy, giving up, quitting, giving into a lesser standard, so to speak. But he was absolutely adamant that his reputation went into the quality of his work. And one of the reasons I am as relentless as I am in my field of study is because I saw my dad not settling when it came to the quality of what he was going to contribute or provide to others. He didn't compromise. It was the very best he could do, or you do it until you can do that. You do it until you can meet your standard. So one of the reasons people ask me, how can you do all the things you do? How can you keep going? I guess it's genetic. There was a time where my father was, I think, working in an attic. He was driving nails or something, and he drove a nail right through here, all the way through. And do you think he stopped and, called the ER or whatever? No. He pulled the nail out, he put some duct tape around the wound and kept working because he wanted to finish. That is something that you would never catch me doing. But my dad is one of the most relentless badasses you'll ever meet. And he's this skinny guy. He's like maybe 125 pounds. But he's got a black belt in judo. He was an Army Ranger. One of the most relentless guys I've ever seen. And so much of it was just because he wanted to do a good job for people. So if you're hurting, keep going. I'm like I said, I didn't take his example of ignoring pain and whatever. But I've learned that there are things you can push through. There are things that even though they hurt, they're manageable. They can be worked around. They can be worked through. Not so much overcome, but you can manage to persevere and keep going regardless. When I look at my dad and everything that he's done to raise 4 kids, sometimes it seemed like 18, 20-hour days, working to put an entire fire alarm system in a major industrial warehouse by himself or with one other person. He just did what he had to do to support his family. He did what he had to do to put food on the table. We never missed a Christmas. We always had good meals. And here's my dad with dyslexia and Asperger's. Him and my mom started their own business where my dad would install burglar and fire alarms for homes, businesses, whatever. That very narrow skill set that didn't require him to do algebra or calculus or know the state capitals or anything like that, or the stuff that they wouldn't teach him because they didn't know how to teach him. Left him feeling stupid. But he had a zone of genius that he focused on and turned that into a service he could provide other people. This was back in the 80s, folks, before the internet. So I hear all kinds of people on the spectrum today that say, I can't do it because I can't do it at school. I'm never going to go to college because I struggle. Then there's my dad. Never went to college, had all these difficulties, found this narrow skill set along with my mom for at least 20 years. He worked tirelessly, relentlessly to be of service to his clients and to provide for his family. So when someone says to me, I can't because I don't have a credential, because I don't have a training, because I didn't read the right books. Let me tell you about my dad. He didn't have any of that stuff either. He raised 4 kids with what he had. The old saying, do the best with what you got. You have more going for you than you realize. But chances are you have a lot more can'ts in your head. You have a lot more shoulds in your head. Some kind of programming that somebody else shoved between your ears that tells you unless you meet certain criteria, unless you have a certain status, you are not worthy to contribute. Let me tell you about my dad. I still look at the man in his early 80s and I wonder if he knows the impact he's had on his children and the people around him. And it occurred to me that I don't think he does. So this video is not just for you. This video is for him. So Dad, I want to tell you how much you meant to me all these years, how much I love you, and what an inspiration you've been and continue to be. So while all those teachers left you with the impression that you were stupid, I want to tell you the impression you made on me. You're one of my heroes. And that's the thing I want you to remember. So everybody that's watched this, I hope this has been helpful to you. And Dad, I love you and I'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.